it's amazing. Like when I realize people level up in the team and then they get to a point where there's always like imposter syndrome and people are like, okay, I think I know how to do this, but I'm not ready to tell a client that I know how to do this yet. And we keep saying like, there's no difference between being able to articulate something and being able to do it in this industry, because the articulation is like, okay, so we have this idea for this influencer strategy. Here's the people we reach out to. Here's when they post. Like that's the whole strategy. You've already said it. Now we just go do that thing. Like literally just being able to take the idea and form it in words is so powerful. It makes everything a lot easier.
Well, what's up, Tim? How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Where are you based out of, by the way?
I'm in LA.
Okay, cool. Wow, it's early out there. It's like 8 a.m.
It's 8 a.m. Yeah.
All right, cool. Awesome.
Love it.
So tell me about Loop Agency, how you started it, all the juicy details, if you can.
Yeah. So we started pretty accidentally. I think a lot of agencies just kind of fall into it. My two co-founders and I, we used to work at Mute 6. So we were at like a bigger agency, learned a lot there. Like I came in with very little marketing experience. Like I'd kind of taught myself. And when I came, like, I don't think we realized how quickly we would grow in an environment like that. And we were kind of just all left to ourselves. And the three of us, I think independently, like me, Tim, and Taylor, my two co-founders, the three of us like just learned to scale accounts and like owned our client relationships in a really serious way. And then kind of around COVID, like around, I want to say like March, about this time last year, I left. I just wanted to like try a different agency and just like see what else was out there, and I went to a different agency that I absolutely hated. I won't say the name of the agency. It's no fault of theirs. It's no fault of the agency itself. It's just like I learned very quickly what the difference is between performance marketing and like just running ads. And yeah, and it was just like the KPI was like putting things from one spreadsheet into another spreadsheet. And I did 2 weeks and I was like, I can't do it. I literally cannot. I'm bad at this. I will fail at this. So I left. I had one freelance client just by really good luck. And then Taylor and Tim, my co-founders, just kind of kept coming. I would get some work. I would give it to Tim. Taylor was still at Mute 6 and we were talking about starting the thing. And we were just like, there was just like a lot of excitement in the air around it. And then eventually just like other clients kept coming. And then obviously COVID hit as well.
Right.
So I think since COVID, the three of us have just sat at our computers. And I think I don't remember doing anything else, honestly. It felt like just being in a chat room this whole time. And we've just chatted. And like somehow that has created what is now like 12 people, 12 close. We're about to hire a couple of people too. So it's like, it's really like a lot has happened in the last year, but we've just been sitting here. We've just been at my computer. And yeah, it's a really crazy experience.
I think that's amazing. I feel like lately I've been having dreams of like Zoom calls. I think it's really bad. I should go outside. But
Yeah, me too.
I saw on LinkedIn, first off, I found you through LinkedIn. I think we found each other through LinkedIn. I'm not sure how it worked. You're pretty aggressive on LinkedIn. I like your stuff a lot. It's pretty cool.
I had never used LinkedIn before until like December. And I was like, I need to figure out how to get some clients. And it's so good. I like LinkedIn because you can just say stuff and people are there to like learn things, which I think is nice.
Yeah, the mindset's way different from like Instagram or Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when you're like a bunch of nerds, like I'm just talking about things that I genuinely enjoy. And I feel like on LinkedIn, it resonates way more. And I'm just like, oh, cool. You can't really
yeah.
On Instagram, they're like,
exactly.
Yeah, LinkedIn is definitely my channel for sure. I need to get a little bit more active, but I've been putting out fires. You mentioned this idea between performance marketing versus media buying. I just want to double click on that. There's a lot I wanted to double click on, but I think that's the biggest one that stood out. I know with your agency, first off, the growth in your agency has been monumental. I remember reading the other day on LinkedIn how you guys hit your first 6-figure month. That's insane. Congratulations in terms of revenue.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't even.
That's insane.
It's so insane, and try not to look at it too much. Like that's what helped us get there. It's just like pretend it's not happening. But no, absolutely. Like in terms of the difference between performance marketing and media buying, I had no idea what I was doing when I came into this. And
We
all I
never know
knew,
what we're doing.
no, of course you don't. Of
We
course you don't.
figure it all
And
out as
like,
we go.
but it helped so much because I didn't know what I wasn't allowed to do. No one was like, oh, your job is to do this stuff in the accounts and not do these other things. So I would just take my clients and just do whatever I thought would work. And the clients were down. Like I wasn't like scamming them. Like I'd just be like, here is what I think we should do in your account. I need to do this and this elaborate thing. I need to do this with the shopping feed. This is what I'm going to test. This is the landing, like just the stuff that I just thought of. And then eventually, like with everything in marketing, like 1 in 5 of them would work. And then if it works, like the client would just scale. And I think operating like that was like, people just loved it. People just had such a good time because like clients don't really come to an agency for the KPI of like having their media bought correctly. They come for having their business grow or like having their problem solved.
Yep.
And that's all I knew how to do. So that was like, I just did that and everybody loved it. It was so much fun. And also like, I think for me, like I'm not like as organized as some media buyers. Like some media buyers are really good at like keeping tabs on everything, have super organized spreadsheets, are really good at allocating budgets. And I'm just not that naturally. So
I think
I
that's a
think,
myth, honestly. Because
yeah,
I mean, like people think optimization is more or less like I've been talking to a lot of media buyers and a lot of different agency owners too. And like the myth is like, oh, if you keep everything organized in a spreadsheet, like that's how you properly optimize. Like, no,
yeah,
exactly what you said is radically listening to the client. I mean, just you want to make sure that you have your tests in order, that you know what you're testing. I think that's where a lot of media buyers like screw up, where they don't know what they're testing because they're super disorganized in that way. You don't need to have everything like, I don't know, crazy meticulous, as long as the idea is that you know what needle you're moving,
yeah,
you can isolate
exactly.
that needle and you know exactly what you're moving. Naturally, it's going to be a little chaotic because there's so many moving parts, especially when you're doing optimizations outside of just the media buy.
Yeah,
Like you had just mentioned, you actually take the time to listen to the client. You take the time to listen to the client, understand the unique nuances of their business. I think that's like my biggest differentiator. And I actually solve business problems and I care about revenue. A lot of times people really get caught up in these minute optimizations that, you have to take a step back and think, is this really pushing the needle for the client? So I even nix some things to report to the client because I'm just like, I'm really trying to keep it big picture. The reporting will always be there if they want to like, go back to the books and like, I'll have my reporting, but in regards to our one-on-one communications, like I'm talking the way they talk, you know?
yeah, I mean, that's exactly what we do as well. And I learned that from my mentor, Elma, who was my boss at Mute Six. And a lot of other media buyers would report. Everyone kind of did things differently. Like there wasn't like, we just kind of made it up as we all made it up. But a lot of other media buyers would do these long reports. And Elma was like 4 bullet points. That's all you need. What have you done? What are you going to do? What's worked? What hasn't worked?
Yep.
Show them that you're on their side and that you're going to solve the problem.
I love that. That's literally how I feel so validated.
It's amazing. And you save time. Like you save a lot of time and you can use that time to do stuff for them. Like you're not just going to slack off. Like you use that time to like think of ideas or like think about their business.
Right. And a lot of business owners don't even have the space, like the mental space to think about expansion or scaling or creative ideas with marketing. So I mean, I feel like with my clients, that's where they get the most value. And that's where they're most excited about like, wow, we've never thought about these ideas. Like we've never thought about implementing in this way. Like I say, like we bridge top of funnel initiatives with the bottom of the funnel initiatives. And I think most people have a hard time of connecting those two. Like, oh, how do I make like all of our branding efforts actually convert? Well, let's run a remarketing campaign. We'll solve
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot more
Exactly.
intricacies involved, but that's basically the gist of it at the end of the day.
Yeah. It's funny. Like when I've been teaching a couple of people recently, and it always feels funny once you've taught someone how to like do marketing or like do a thing, because it's inevitably just a list of instructions. It's just like click this. What's hard about it is the part before that. It's the part where you like are like, okay, so what am I gonna do? Which things am I gonna click? which thing will move the needle. And like running a remarketing campaign is very easy. Like technically, like you could teach anyone to do that, but like knowing what campaign to run at what time with what creative and what, and then how to speak to the client. How do you message that to the client? How do you convince them that you understand what you're talking about? How do you have enough confidence in the moves you're about to make, and then back them up and then adjust if they don't work or if they work in a different way that from what you know?
Mm-hmm.
I remember reading some book a couple of years ago that was talking about PPC management is more like, it's becoming more like flying a plane. And like, if you think about flying a plane, like it used to be that you had to like flick a bunch of knobs and like you're like flying the plane the whole time. Now the job is like, make sure the plane doesn't go down. But if the plane is going to go down, that's when you find out if someone's like a really good pilot or not. Like the hallmark of a really good pilot is like, one, the plane is not going to fall out of the sky. And then if it does, like you can pull it up really fast. And that's like how I think about it, I think.
That's a great analogy. And that's how I think about managing accounts. It's all just essentially troubleshooting.
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like it's always troubleshooting. Okay, let's readjust to, this new campaign, this new initiative that the client has running, or, like how can we promote this one thing specifically and then tie it into our overall efforts while also keeping performance up to date or profitability, or keeping profitability into account rather. But you mentioned Mute Six, and Mute Six is a pretty big agency. They're like top dog in the PPC space, and I find it great to be validated one on how to manage accounts. I feel awesome in that regard. But I'm curious, how was your experience at Mute Six? How did you get into that? Like, it sounds like previously talking to you, you mentioned how you were in a band.
Mm-hmm.
So piece all of that together: band, Mute Six, Loop.
Yeah. Okay. So I was in a band. I was in like a touring rock band. It was great. We were like playing everywhere. We were very, very tired. We were like on tour all the time. We didn't make any money. Like nobody makes any money. That's the great secret of it. If you like look at all like one of the reasons why bands are all like 24-year-olds or younger is because you just don't take home anything. So at some point in time, I was like, oh man, I need to figure something out. And I started like building stores. I started drop shipping. I started like selling stuff online, like on tour. Like I'd be like in the back of the van, like on my phone, like learning how to do this stuff. And I started making money. Like I had traction and I knew how to run an account. So I like learned how to run Google ads. I started with SEO. I got some traction doing like Instagram DMing, and it was very annoying. But then I learned how to run Google ads, and I was like, okay, like not that many people know how to run Google ads. So I had a little bit of an advantage. It's like a little technical. And I did a biomedical science degree in university, and I feel like that helped a lot. Like it's kind of the same. It's like you look at a graph, you like think about what the graph means, and then you like make the graph go a different way. And like that's basically like what I used to do anyway. So it wasn't like crazy different. But to get into Mute Six, I was like, it was literally everything that you learned. Like I went on a Reddit post. I was like, how to get a career in marketing. And they were like, make a LinkedIn. And I was like, okay, I'll make a LinkedIn. And then like had a LinkedIn, like had my skills on it. And like this guy, Gerard, who I know, he reached out, and I guess Mid Six was hiring pretty aggressively at the time. Now being an agency owner, I completely understand this. Hiring is the hardest thing by a factor of a million.
Yeah.
So like, it makes perfect sense to me that they wanted to bring everyone in. And they obviously just like were just looking for everyone who knew how to run Google ads in LA. It just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Obviously I'm a white guy, so like that helps like talk your way through stuff. Like I took my way through the interview. I did a test. Like I don't want to say that I didn't know how to do it. I just hadn't done it at scale. And I think I was pretty transparent about that. Like I'd managed a few $1,000s a month. I'd never managed 30, 40,000, $100,000 a month, but I could talk the talk, and I was clearly like coachable. And I think that helped me a lot. And then when I got in there, I was just like, okay, I just need to learn everything as fast as possible. So I just tried to sponge it up, and like it was a good environment because it was scaling so quickly. Everyone had very different experiences at this agency, and I liked that because I would just like go back in Slack and just read everyone's messages and just like dig deep in the G drive and like figure out what was in there and just like use that to be like, okay, what Like, how do you do this job? Like, what do you do? And after a few months, like, it's not that hard if you try to learn it. If you like try to like really try to learn it. It's not like there's no like mental block where you're like, oh, I can't figure this out. It's just like a lot of time and you have to get fast at it.
Yep.
So after a few months, I was like, okay, I'm pretty good. Like, I can run an account now. And then it was really just up from there. I just got lucky. When I say I got lucky, my friend Rachel, who now works at Akenda, who's a great partner of ours, hooked me up. Like, she's noticed early on that I was doing well. She put me on an account that was at risk. Like, it was an account that might have left the agency. They weren't happy with their manager.
Mm-hmm.
I jumped on and I was just like so desperate to prove myself. I was just like, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. Like, we try this. We try this. And like got something to work, like got some like YouTube discovery strategy that like, it just randomly worked. Like, it was just like something that I could never expected to work. Scaled the business like a lot. Like, but it was just a good timing, and I was given a great opportunity. Desperation helped, I think. And then obviously just like people who believed in me and gave me a shot, that has made all the difference in the world.
That's amazing. I think I find that stories are pretty similar in that regard. Like, I teach a lot of people, or I interact with a lot of people that are trying to get into the industry, and the dumbed down version is to just do it. Like, just like aggressively. I mean, like, all the tools are available. Especially, for example, like with my coaching program, I literally give you access to my accounts. So you talked about like deconstructing. I literally would do that in the first agency that I worked at. I just deconstructed these accounts. I just dug in. How do they build this out? Things like that. YouTube videos. How do they build, like, just reverse engineer everything in the agency.
Yeah.
And, I think initially learning anything or trying to grasp anything is a lot of work, just a lot of time, but it's absolutely doable if you just have an average IQ. I don't think it's,
yeah, 100%.
I think the hardest thing is like managing the client, and actually making an impact in their business. That for me was the hardest part. And then on top of that, managing like 50 different accounts, that like literally managing the 50 different accounts, having everything under control and organized. That's ultimately why I didn't like agency life too much. It's just, it's not sustainable.
No.
For me at least. Yeah.
And they're like incentive, like, and this is a problem that we have right now, is that like in an agency, like, it's an amazing place to learn. Like, you can run 50 accounts, but the agency owner is incentivized to give you 50 accounts. And that's too many accounts. Like, you can't do your best work like that. So there's like challenges with that kind of alignment. It's like, at some point it's a great place to learn. I would never, ever, ever have got to this point. I'm like, I would never have done this if I hadn't just spent a year just working at an agency. But it's challenging. Like, it was a lot of work. But yeah, exactly like you said, like, it's not rocket science. It's not like it's not like taking a hard math class or like reading a difficult book. Yeah. It's just that you have to do it. And it's just kind of annoying. Like, you just have to, like, you might not want to. Yeah, you might not want to do it. And then you have to do it. And it's like going in the account and deconstructing. I remember when I would just go in everybody's accounts and just look through and be like, okay, even little things like, how are they naming them? Like, what does that mean for the way that they think? Like, what other campaigns have been here? Like, try to like trace the history. And then exactly like you said, like, it's not just like, okay, what did they actually build? It's like, what do these tests mean in the business? Like, what were they trying to achieve around this time? Like, oh, okay, they tested this kind of landing page. This is the offer that they did. Who's the point of contact? Were they the point of contact then? Do they know about this? Were they thinking it through? Like, what was the revenue like in the business at that time? Like, what problem were they trying to solve? Mm-hmm. Once you know that, you can just kind of trace the emotional energy of it a little bit. And then that solves the client management problem, which is 100% the hardest part. 1,000% the hardest part.
Yeah. That's interesting that you said that. Yeah. When deconstructing accounts, I always find out that the missing piece is like, okay, what's the goal of the client? Like, what was the interaction between the client? Like, what did the client say and things like that? But that alone drives most of the strategy in the account. So without that component, that missing piece. I found a lot of the times it was like poor communication between the account manager and the client, and then the account manager with the rest of the team. That was like
Yeah.
the biggest issue. But that goes into like running an agency and operations and stuff, and other than the actual skill. But then that leads me to the fact that when you're a media buyer, I hate, like, we don't just media buy. Like when I like the term strategist. When you're a paid media strategist, you're managing a lot. You're managing the account. You're kind of working to move the needle for the business, for your client. You're managing the client, and then all of the moving parts in between, like getting all of your ducks in order. Like, for example, we're creating a landing page for a client and like creating a subdomain, and then going back and forth and having them create a CNAME record. And then we're just like, no, we'll just take it, like the little back and forths and things like that. I find that those are particularly challenging, the back and forths, but over time you create systems for it, which make it a little bit easier. With managing your agency now and the tremendous growth that you've had, I can't say congratulations enough. What would you say are like the most difficult challenges now?
Hiring is really hard. Hiring is getting the right people in place is really, really difficult. There's such the reason why this skill is in demand right now is because there aren't that many people who have this level of experience. Because like what you said, like in order to be able to identify that you've moved the needle, you have to have moved the needle before. Like you have to have been successful in someone's business before and be able to prove that it was you who did it. Like this wouldn't have happened without me. I saw the cause and effect. And that's like, there's not that many people who've done that in e-commerce in 2021 who are looking for jobs at any given time. It's like there's a small group of people. So hiring is really, really difficult. I I enjoy it. I just like talking to people. So it's been fun, but it's really hard. Cash flow is really hard. Always. I think for any services business, especially a services business that is growing, it's really hard. We're learning a lot about that as we go, as we grow. And it's getting better. It gets better every day, but it's really hard as well. And I think I have no idea about the nitty gritty of like running a business. Like all I know how to do is like get the client and like do this thing. So uh, learning that there are more things kind of under the surface that all have to be solved together that's really hard too. And then I think the third thing is like kind of changing, like scaling your mindset as a team. Like everything changes so quickly. Your relationships with your coworkers and your co-founder, our relationships change so quickly. We go through so many different jobs together. Like we literally, when we started this a year ago, like we did everything in the accounts. We ran everything in the accounts. We would chat together all day. We would schedule these like hour-long meetings with each other as if that was like we had all the time in the world. Had no idea about this. And then since then, like everything has changed. We've had 3 or 4 different relationships with each other, multiple like emotional states. Managing that is really difficult. And then we're also fully remote. So we never spend time together. We never get a drink together. We never get to kind of decompress after something that's hard. I think that is really, really challenging because you don't know what other people's brains are doing properly.
Yeah, I think that's one of the downsides to remote work, where you're not actually building a culture. Like, I recently hired someone and he's awesome, he's great, but he's in a different country too. Because he's like nomading about, and that's super cool. But I wonder, like, if I'm doing a good job, because I sometimes it's good to have that feedback, that in-person feedback, and sometimes there are things that you teach so much better when someone's just looking over your shoulder. How do you recreate that? And how do you, like, the hardest thing for me is like, how do you build a culture remotely? How do you build a culture remotely? How do you build rapport remotely? I think we're all doing our best, but it's a challenge because it's not the same. I think if you want to scale an agency, or if you want to scale any business, like, you need a core team of members, and that core team of members, they need to all have trust with each other. Like, you need to, I was reading something, I forget where I found it from, like this guy that I'm actually interviewing next week, he reposted something, and it was just like, your first team members or your team members, you want to compensate them well. You want to comp them, or you want to teach them so well that they know that they can leave, like they like have the opportunity, right? But you want to treat them so well that they don't want to leave.
Yeah.
And so that's just terribly difficult. You know, like,
Yeah.
because I want to treat them really well, but like we don't have that one-on-one kind of rapport, that connection.
Yeah.
Whatever, we compensate with long Zoom calls and deep
Yeah.
working sessions. Deep working sessions have been really great, where we just literally, like we don't talk about work. There's no boundaries, or or we have boundaries rather, and we just plug away for an hour and just do deep work.
That's a really good idea. I think that's something that I might steal that, because you learn so much from, I remember learning a lot from just watching people click around in accounts. Like I would just stand over my boss's shoulder and be like, okay, how fast do you do this? Where do your eyes go first? Like, what are you looking at and not looking at? And like, we don't really have a huge amount of opportunity to do that. Just seeing each other's screens and like relaxing into it.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's been a game changer. And just like he'll even ask me like, can I just sit in on you optimizing an account? And I'm just like, that's so boring, but sure. Like,
Oh my God.
absolutely. So
I remember the,
that's really a big game changer. And just like, oh, and then asking questions along the way. And you
yeah,
also have to have the patience to understand, like, you're not going to do work as effectively, but you're front loading a lot so that you can eventually offload and be more comfortable down the line. That's been a
and it's
big
scary to offload too. I think that's the
Oh my
fear
God.
of offloading is actually a big piece. That's been a big piece for all of us. I think it's like, because you get if you come into this job through doing good work for clients, you're attached to that and you're obsessed with doing good work for clients. And sometimes like running an agency is getting someone else to do good work for clients for you so you can go do other things. And it's like terrifying. There's like a big moment where you just have to trust that it'll get done and jump out and let them take over. It's
Yeah.
hard.
The hard thing is, like, I'm working to create an environment where you should be able to fuck up.
Yeah.
You should feel comfortable enough to fuck up the same way I feel. Like you mentioned that space, like I finally had this space where I could just do whatever I want. So I like that's how I got to the next level essentially. So I'm trying to recreate that space, and you kind of realize how freaking neurotic you are, and like but that makes you so good at what you are, right? Or what you're
Absolutely.
at.
It makes you so good. And that was when I first realized that I was going to be able to learn to do this. When I came in to an account and I had like spent this week, the first week I was in an account, I really wanted to like show Elmar that I knew what I was doing, that I'd learned it. And I like followed his naming convention perfectly. And I came in and I showed him the account. I'm not that organized, but I like really made an effort. And he was like, you're so OCD, like you're going to be a good media buyer. And I do think there's like, you get that you're like half of your brain is very loose and then half of your brain is like, okay, I need to do this exactly the same way every time to make it simpler. And it's hard to hand that off to someone and just be like, you're definitely going to make mistakes. Like you're going to waste money. Like things are going to go wrong, but that's important. That's part of it.
I have some theories when it comes to a good media buyer. I'd rather teach a person who's fundamentally creative.
Yeah.
Right side, is it right? Or no, left logical, left side skills, left brain side skills, as opposed to the other way around. Because I can't teach someone who's very rigid how to be creative. It's very difficult. But if you're a creative, then I could just because I feel that way myself. Like I'm a creative and I taught myself all these skills. And so I became very flexible in them, and like, I'm pretty sure you running, like being in a band, I'm pretty sure you're quite similar in that regard.
Exactly. It's so much easier. And the two best, I mean, everyone on the team is incredible, but we've taught two people who were both from the music industry, one who was a tour manager and one who was just in a band. And they are just astoundingly fast, like just so quick to learn everything, because you don't have these preconceived notions of like, oh, well, it has to be done this way, or like, this is how I do this. It's just like, well, I'm going to do it now. Guess I have to do it. And it's way easier to teach. And I think the other thing is that with the way that this industry is going, it's like automation is going to take a lot of that busy work and a lot of that organizational work. And you're left with the levers that aren't going to get automated, and they're all creatives. They're all like, okay, how do we communicate with the client? What kind of creative are we running? What's the landing page? What's the offer? What's the like real value proposition? And that is human. And like, you can just learn how to think like that.
Yeah. That's why I'm excited about automation. I know that there's downsides. I mean, no one likes losing data, right? I think that's very, for someone who's a control freak, kind of unsettling. But at the same time, it's like, okay, now I can do the work that really matters and I can leave it up to machines to do what they're best at. Like Google is going to be able to calculate equations at a way faster rate than I ever could. You know, they're going to be able to sift through data. The idea is to just give them the right kind of data for them to optimize, you know. With working with people who were previously in a bands, like what have you learned with hiring non-marketers?
Mhm. I think that so the people that I hired, I was lucky that we had a previous relationship. Like I knew them, we'd been on tour together. I
Mhm.
knew that they were like real good at working. One thing that was helpful about being in a band is when you're in a band, you kind of live at work. Like you're kind of constantly at work. If you're on tour, you live in this weird like twilight zone where you're like hanging out, but you're also always at work. And I think that made it actually quite a bit easier because it's like this job. You were always at work, like we really are. I think, yeah, I think testing or like trying to, what I do is try to tell people how much like learning fast is important to me. Like that's really the only thing that I think is an indicator of whether you'll be successful or not. Like how quickly can you learn? Like how quickly are you willing to try to learn? And if I like, I think if we set that, when we set that tone from the start, we set the tone that like, okay, the game is how fast can you learn? That's the whole game. It's not like how um, perfectly can you do this? How quickly can you be like us? It's just like there's infinite stuff out there. How fast can you get it? Um, People will just do it. Like people, and like if you give people latitude and freedom, like most people are going to go out of their way and learn it. I don't know. It is difficult. I actually think I'd almost rather hire non-marketers than marketers for an entry level role, for an entry level for a new role.
Why is that? Because you feel like they haven't been contaminated with rigid ways of optimizing accounts or building accounts?
Yeah, I think I can teach it pretty fast. And yeah, we've definitely had a couple of experiences of being like, oh, okay, you learned media buying and you learned it in a different way. And now I'd have to unlearn this and then we'd have to do the next thing. Um, Whereas someone who's like just a blank mind, it like takes less time for some reason.
For me, I think I find that the people with the right mindset, like, I feel like mindset is something we say all the time, but like, what does that exactly mean? I think in this specific case, like, you have to be passionately curious, you have to be a fast learner, or at least be like hungry to learn this, like, super excited to learn it. There has to be some kind of basis of intelligence. You know, like, I think with any job, like, you have to have average IQ, nothing crazy. And you have to, for me, I found that people that are avid, not necessarily readers, but like they're always learning something new, like they're just into, I don't know, whatever it is, like they're always looking at a blog for this particular topic or something like that, or have some kind of intense hobby where they're
Yeah.
like, I need to see some kind of neuroticism.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah. like
exactly.
like for you it's music, like the band, like,
Yeah.
you know, like with music you have to, like, I play the ukulele. I'm not particularly good, but I'm learning I'm taking it more seriously this year. And like, you have to practice every day, you know,
Yeah.
you have to practice consecutively, you have to be neurotic, a little bit neurotic about it. So I want to it's hard to articulate that in just a word. It's more of like a je ne sais quoi, but it, you have to have that, like, ugh, that little neurotic tendency, then
Yeah.
you can
Yeah,
literally translate
exactly.
anything that you do.
And you have to like be at a certain level, want to be at a different level, and be willing to be like, okay, what am I going to have to do? I'm going to have to go on a blog and like read it, or like I'm going to have to do some of this stuff. Like the day to day of learning how to do this looks like reading instruction manuals and like watching YouTube videos. And you have to be the kind of person who would do that anyway. And like, I mean, that's kind of how I got into this. Like literally, like I was doing surveys on my computer. I was like trying to make money. I was like, okay, I'll do a survey for a brand, and I would get paid 50 cents. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna be clicking online. I know I love to click online. I'm gonna be online anyway. So why don't I find a way to click like that is just more enjoyable and I get to learn some stuff. And then I was like, wait a second, there's so much in here. And it is, there's just like there's endless stuff. So the reality is you're gonna have to work. Like we have to work. Like that's life. Like this is a reasonably interesting thing to learn and to do and to like test stuff.
Yeah, it does require a lot of work. I think that when I say hard work, I mean like we're not out there in like the mines or something, like
Yeah.
I'm optimizing an account and then I could go out for a nice walk and then I can go back to optimizing an account. And a lot of times like from minor optimizations I could kind of do on my phone sometimes, especially if you have like with Google you have the right scripts in place. I think the hard, like I said, it's like the client communication stuff, just making sure the client's happy. Like at the end of the day, if I have the client's trust, then I have the playground to then really test without getting, the client won't get pissed. The client will be like, oh, I trust you. So I understand that this week our KPIs might not look so nice. Like I trust you in that regard. So that for me, like I think onboarding is very rigorous just to build that trust. Trust us that we have the idea, the right picture in mind, like this, so then when we have to get on a call weekly, you're not going to be pissed off at certain numbers. You're not going to be like, this is absolute crap. And just like, no, I understand that, performance is going to drop a little bit because our goals are to scale into new avenues and we're testing new audiences and new creatives. So we had more budget, blah, 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 blah. So for me, it's just like initially that trust, and then everything's kind of cool after that. I love that working on my own independently, or it's weird because I say independently, but now I'm like growing a thing and I feel like you're in the same.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you do have to think about cash flow, and now it's just like, I can't just be like, oh, I don't feel like doing this. Now it's just like, okay, I have to do this because I have cash flow and I have people on payroll. So it's like,
but that's another fun thing. It's like, oh, I have to do it because people depend on me. And that's another addictive part of it. Like if that's another motivator. If you get to a point where you're like, oh, okay, I kind of know how to run an account now. Like I feel like you're at the point where like, if you jumped on to almost any account, like you could probably make it work. Like it's not that hard. But what is new and hard is like, oh, okay, you have to run a team. You have to make sure you have enough money to pay the team. You have to keep this other set of moving parts together. And that's when it became fun for me again. It's like, okay, I got to go back on the blog post journey and start from scratch. I have to learn this again.
Yeah. You have to, I mean, like that kind of grit and the scrappiness, it just transcends. So I agree. It is fun. What would you say are the best skills that most marketers, because I think right now it's a completely different world to where it was when we first started, which was like 4 or 5 years ago, right around there. We came in like the golden age of advertising, I feel like, or people were, everything was more manual, like we were like the heroes. Now it's like automation is taking over and all the creatives are taking over, and we can kind of take a step back a little bit. But with the industry changing so rapidly and really transitioning into automation, what do you think are the best skills marketers should have today, in your opinion?
I mean, it's still client communication. Like that is 100% the most useful thing. It's amazing. Like when I realize people level up in the team and then they get to a point where there's always like imposter syndrome and people are like, okay, I think I know how to do this, but I'm not ready to tell a client that I know how to do this yet. And we keep saying like, there's no difference between being able to articulate something and being able to do it in this industry, because the articulation is like, okay, so we have this idea for this influencer strategy. Here's the people we reach out to. Here's when they post. Like that's the whole strategy. You've already said it. Now we just go do that thing. Like literally just being able to take the idea and form it in words is so powerful. It makes everything a lot easier. That's, I think, the highest level thing. In terms of tactics, I would say getting outside of the account itself and finding wins everywhere. Finding wins on a Shopify app, or finding wins on like customer reviews, or finding wins on like new creative, like really like not letting yourself get stuck into one thing or what worked previously, because it's getting weird. Like what works is just doing everything kind of at once and finding efficiencies in the business overall, like finding different ways to increase conversion rate or to increase maybe not click-through rate. Conversion rate's a big one, obviously. Customer lifetime value, if you can find ways to increase that, just finding different wins for people, huge value there.
Yeah. And I think that leads to like call them like adjacent skill sets that you should have. Like, okay, there's a tactical skill set of learning of learning the nuances of Facebook ads and Google ads, like understanding the account structures, how to even launch a campaign, when to, what automated bidding strategies to use versus manual, whatever. Then there are these adjacent skill sets that I feel like that have helped me, one, get into the industry, and two, allowed me to scale into where I'm at. And I think for me, that was design. That was also like a very deep understanding of human psychology just through reading. Like I didn't have a background in it. I took like maybe like 5 psychology classes at university. And design for me was the biggest one. Communication skills, being able to articulate that and present it to the client in a way that really makes sense. And one thing that I don't have naturally that I've been really aggressively learning on my own are just like basic statistics.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I previously worked at an agency called Adventure Media, ran by Isaac Rudansky. And he actually, I was on the verge of kind of getting fired, I think. Yeah, I was on the verge of getting fired. And I was like a month in or 2 months in. And he had mentioned, like, listen, you need to get your stat skills up. And I was just, because I'm not good at math at all. I think that's changed now. It's because I had to teach myself, but you just need to take a basic stats course. And that's what I did. I like took a Udemy basic stats course. I learned like, I had my brother teach me like how to just calculate percentages really quickly, like off the top of my head, like the tricks there. My stepmom's an accountant too. So she gave me like all her stat textbooks too. And I reviewed them. I think there's like that mixed with the creative, which makes you absolutely indispensable, I think is the word. Like you will never be without a job or without opportunities if you can really balance those two. That tactical, like the ads manager, both on Google and Facebook specifically, because those are the two big boys in this industry, plus basic stats, plus creative, foundational for creative, and then a little bit of CRO or behavioral psychology, and you're set.
Yeah, you will literally, yeah, absolutely. If you know all of that, you will never not have a job ever again. And it's not rocket science. Like it's literally first year stats. Like I'm so lucky I took one stats class literally 10 years ago and it's carried me this whole time. It's enough. It's enough. Like it was great. It was a good class, but you can do it on Udemy. You can do it on YouTube. You can just do it anywhere. But that enough analytical framework to be able to look at numbers and be like, okay, I understand what this means ish. And I can associate that with someone's consumer behavior. And then I can articulate that to a client. You will never not have a job.
I agree. I think you'd be set for life.
Yeah,
At least in this
absolutely.
industry, and I think it's just like right now it's booming because look at how you're hiring. Like I'm pretty sure in like a couple of months, like I'm going to be needing someone else too.
Yeah.
And it's just so many opportunities, and I'm so glad that we kind of jumped in where there weren't as many hoops as there. I think there's a lot of more barriers now because people are getting a little bit more savvier. Not just like for me, I was just like a photographer and I was working at a print shop, a graphic design print shop, and I kind of just like, oh, Google Ads, I got certified and whatever, and I jumped into a job. I think right now the barrier to entry is probably a little bit higher than it was when we first started, and rightly so. Like this is how the industry corrects itself, especially since you don't need a degree to necessarily get in here. So I think we got in at the perfect time, and now we are realizing how it's booming so quickly. And as long as you have like those basic requirements and a good mindset, like, and sometimes initially, I think like even being able to be scrappy and working for free initially, like just building up that body of work helps. All of it helps. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a huge, not so much point of contention, but definitely like something that has been really, really helpful for me. I don't think I worked for free as much as I worked for basically, well, I did. I worked for free in the sense that I was running my own business that was very unprofitable or just
Working for
even.
free.
Just barely broke even because dropshipping is like impossible to make money at. And then
Yeah,
it's so ridiculous.
It's a rite of passage.
Yeah, but it's a great way to learn. But then also working for free or very cheap, because you know you're going to get the case study or because you know you're going to get a new client out of it. It's totally worth doing. Like the more you can give to people, like I know that value is becoming like a kind of a buzzword, but it's true as if you give something to someone, they will come back, they will repay you in spades. I didn't have to do the stuff that I did in the account 2 years ago, but I wanted to learn and I wanted to like do stuff. Like the more you can like just give it all away, just give it all away. People will pay you. There's so much opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's where like my biggest clients came in. There's
Yeah.
all like this compounding effect of
Hmm.
bouncing off of the law of reciprocity, meaning like when you give something to someone, they feel forever in your debt in a way.
Yeah.
And it's just like whatever. I think like for me, it's just the mindset of building leverage. Like how can I
Yep.
help people? It's not coming from a maybe like a touch of opportunist, but it's really like leading by the way that I'm naturally am. Like how can I help people? And then also at the same time build that leverage. So it's like strategy and then also being a good person.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's leverage in that, like, yeah, I mean, it's how you build a business. It's like you do things for people, you help them, and then you can scale the way that you help them. You can help more people, and then they'll give you more money eventually.
And that leads in like really nicely into this new course that you're building out for e-commerce. Could you break that down a little bit? And like
Yeah.
I'm
Oh my
curious
God.
to know like for you how teaching online has changed you as a marketer,
Yeah.
and where do you see like the future of it?
So I think this is a really interesting time. So while I was in this band and while I was just like hanging out, like I had a day job, and my day job was working for Kaplan Test Prep, which is like teaches like the MCAT and the SAT and stuff like that. So I was a TA for their live online classes since like 2012, I want to say. So basically like, and it was good. Like they were really good classes, and there's like a live teacher, it's like a live chat. Like this was before Zoom calls. Like there's a live chat, and they taught the whole MCAT or the whole DAT or whatever in like a really short period of time. So I've done that just so many times. Like I've taught the same class over and over and over and over. And I wish something like that existed when I learned marketing, because the way that I learned was like, I went on like weird internet forums and like learned like down the bottom of black hat world, there'd be like some tip that like helped me. I had to go through like 20 pages of spam. I wasted all this money. Like it was just like difficult. It was difficult
What's
to
all
learn.
the anxiety that comes along with it and like the
Yeah,
stress?
exactly. There's so much stress and like, yeah, and it's really difficult. And what I've wanted to do is like, what is the fastest way you could do this? Like literally, like if you just wanted to learn, like how could you do it super fast? And that has coincided with something that's happening to us a lot, which is that we're getting a lot of prospects or a lot of leads who are new businesses that are currently spending probably $0 to $5,000 a month on Facebook ads. And like the reality, and then new companies, they have a great brand, they've like built something, so they have a great website, they have a team, but the reality is like you don't really need or want an agency at that level.
Yeah.
Like
Under
it's not gonna
5K, I always say you should do it yourself.
yeah, do it yourself. Like you need to learn, like you need to understand the metrics, like you need to understand how the platforms are set up. So this is an attempt to solidify, crystallize all that knowledge, and then make a product that is effective for someone who isn't ready for an agency or who needs to learn the stuff. And it's like,
Mm.
um, how simply can we do it? How do you set up your ad accounts? How do you set up your Shopify store? Like I think the plugins piece has been really exciting for us. Like what are the apps you should use? We'll just tell you. There's a list. It's very simple. Like here are the ones that we use. We never change. We just use the same stack for everything. So here's what we do. Here's why we think it's faster. You can use this. You can test other stuff out. Learning this yourself would have taken a year of trying different things, learning that the integrations don't work perfectly, learning that like, oh, okay, I've tried this thing. Like it's just going to be faster. So that's the goal. And then the first time we run this, I'm going to do it for free, like kind of like what we were talking about. Like a lot of things will probably go wrong. Okay. So we're going to do it with real stores. So I think that's a big piece as well. Like
Yeah.
I always wished when I was learning that I had access to data, because you always get kind of fantasy data, or you just like click this and it might work, but you never see in the accounts. And so much of the way that we learned that a lot of the time when you learn from case studies, you learn like really extreme results. Like, oh,
Right.
this store scaled by like this, a million, billion%. And it's not always going to be how it looks. It's not always how the ad accounts look. So like, you kind of just need to see like these like okay, here's how we do the job. Here's how we do it on that every day. So we have a client who came to us, or a potential client. Her name's Soleil Sunwear, and it's like cool stuff. Like it's like sun protective clothing that you, if you're a mom and you are like burn easily, like you wear this when you go outside and you go hiking. And there are a couple of other competitor products that have scaled, and it's a high AOV, it's a high margin, it's fashion. It's like all the metrics make sense. I'm like, okay, this is a slam dunk. So we're gonna do that one. I'm hoping that it works. I mean, if it doesn't, like there'll be some growth for sure. I don't know if it will go crazy, but we'll show you how we set everything up. We'll show.
I'm gonna join that. You know, my the media buyer that I hired, who's not necessarily a media buyer, does a lot of things, just like me. He told me about your course. He was just like, "Oh, I signed up for that." I was like, "Oh, I'm interviewing him today." And he was like, and some of the questions I asked you are just like this. I was like, "Do you want to ask him anything?" He was just like, "Oh, this is what I would ask," and I was like, "Oh, thanks."
Oh my God, amazing. Yeah, that's easy.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna plug that in for sure to the. So if you could just send me that link prior, that is really cool. I think that I try and recreate something similar with everything that I do. It's just like getting real data so that you can deconstruct it. And what's amazing with what you're doing is that you're actually bringing it live. So there's like the stakes of it not. I think you learn more with the failures in an account because that's how you like you mentioned the plane analogy. That's how you really see how someone drives, you know,
Yeah.
or someone manages the plane crashing, you know, like this is what you have to do, whatever. The troubleshooting is where the hard stuff lies, and like, okay, this is like now everything that I've learned comes into play. And like here's how you do it.
100%,
Fun.
100%. And it's also client management. Like the client is going to be on these calls. Like we're going to work it out together. Like we haven't talked through everything we're going to do in these accounts yet. So
Oh my god, this
there's
is
a period of negotiation. Yeah. I mean, not because of any like, just because we haven't had time. Honestly, I just haven't had time. So it'll just be like, we'll see how this goes. But I mean, exactly like you said, like in success or failure, everyone will like, there's a lot to learn there. So I'm not particularly, I don't think I would be super embarrassed if the store didn't scale and we just kind of learned a few things and we figured out what we need to do next. As long as there's like momentum and forward motion and we are seeing growth where we can see it and we're identifying opportunities, that's like all you could learn anyway.
I think this is going to be incredibly valuable, and you're doing it for free.
I'm doing the first one for free. It's gonna be messy right now. So we're gonna put a bunch of people in, see how it goes, record it all, and then I think from there it'll be like, okay, what's the model for this?
I would love to be a part of that, but man, I can't wait for you guys to charge.
Yeah, yeah, I'm excited too.
Yeah, that's awesome. What would you to wrap this up? What kind of a bit of advice, if you could give like a one liner to a marketer who's starting off or maybe a year in, what would you tell them? Someone whose goal is to eventually own their own thing.
Just do a bunch of stuff. It's so cheesy. It's so like everyone says this, but like if you are thinking too much, if you're like, oh, maybe this will work, like you're not doing the right thing. Like just get like calm down the brain, chill with the brain, and just do a bunch of stuff. It's not as hard as you're making it.
Execute. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you so much for all the excellent tidbits that you bestowed onto us.
Oh no, likewise, Cynthia. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.